Go ahead.
Okay, hello, my name is Harold Sosnowich. It's Thursday, January the 5th, 1989, and we're at the CKND television studios in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It's my pleasure today to have the opportunity to interview Mr. Joseph Riesenbach, survivor from the Second World War. Anytime? Okay. Mr. Riesenbach, I'd like to thank you very much for coming in today and to agreeing to this interview. Could you first start with just telling us your name and where you were born and when?
Okay, my name is Joe Riesenbach. I was born in Poland, a little town called Markowa, which is 7 miles from Rzeszów. And I was born 1928, May 1928, and that was my hometown.
Could you tell us something about your memories of the town of Markowa?
Well, Markowa was a heavily populated little village, or perhaps you can call it a town. The Jewish population, I believe, we had about 25 to 29 families, as I recall. As I can remember as a child, going to school, and that was a short time, because the Germans came in, and shortly after I was cut off from being allowed to go to school because I was Jewish. My memories from school years was very short and vague. All I remember that I wasn't too happy with the school system. There was a lot of pressure on me, a lot of discrimination and anti-Semitism. They were picking on me by the teachers and the students. And they made me do things which normally they did not do to the other students.
Could you give me an example of what you...
Well, I recall a couple incidents. One especially being punished severely is kneeling in a corner. I believe there were dry peas, and I had to knee there for I don't know for how long. It was very painful. I was also beaten on the hand by a wooden ruler quite often. And the reason I don't recall. I don't think I was a bad student, but my marks were pretty good. A few occasions, one of the teachers made me, I don't know how to put it, wipe with my bare feet his mucus or spit, or whatever. It was a very unpleasant. I didn't want to do it. He made me do it. And I was crying all the way home. I told my parents, and nothing we can do. We couldn't complain. And that's about all I remember as far as school, because there was a very short time that...
This was a public school?
There was a public school, yes.
So you would have taken, what, Polish? And
with the Polish children. I don't recall or having Jewish children in that school. I just don't recall having any friends or knowing that there were Jewish kids in the same school as I was.
Did you have any extra Jewish education?
Yes, I had a private teacher or tutor for Hebrew and Jewish and the religious part of teaching as well.
And this was just for yourself?
Was, for myself, yes.
And in your home?
In my home, in our home, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about your family from when you were a youngster up to the time of the war?
My family, I had 2 sisters, father and mother, and I had a grandmother. We were all living together. We had a lovely home. We were in a very good financial situation. We owned quite a few businesses, so we were not going hungry, or we were considering, quite well-to-do in the area. My parents were most of the time away from home, attending their different ventures. So it was myself and the 2 sisters, just practically running the home as youngsters.
What kind of businesses were your parents?
Well, my father, in the winter season, he was in the cattle business, purchasing cattle and bringing them home. We had a barn behind our home and sort of kept them through a transit time and then shipped to the market, which they were taking once a week to the market, I believe, about 4 or 5 miles from our place. In the spring, my father was buying orchards, which it's hard maybe to understand in here, when the bloom comes out, and that was, he had to assess it, the value and the crop, and later in the fall, what it's going to produce and what it's going to return. So he was buying orchards, and in the fall we had a crew which we had to pick this fruit and bring in and warehousing it in our place. We had a warehouse as well, and then shipped to different various markets. Also, we were in the egg exporting business. My mother had a store, a retail store. It's like a food store in here. And also she had a fabric outlet as well, selling material at a bale.
This was at your home or in the community?
All in our home.
So it all operated from your home?
Yes. And I also remember my grandmother had a kretschmer. You probably call that in here like a beer parlor or pub, something like that. Yes. And just with my grandmother, that was her sideline. And those were the ventures of our establishment.
So by standards in that community, your family was fairly well-to-do?
Fairly well-to-do, yes.
Did you get any sense of how you were perceived by people around you, your family? Did you encounter any comments about your family from neighbors?
Neighbors,
friends?
I remember mostly neighbors as a child. You know, I was going to their homes and chumming around with their friends. We were well liked. There was no evidence of any anti-Semitism as far as I detected as a child. I did not say anything through my parents saying anything bad against them. They sort of looked up to us because we needed their help and they needed our help, and we needed their help. We also had land as well. They had to work, you know, our land, and we used their services for transportation and so on. And I believe my father mentioned we helped them financially as well. So we were well liked, and so I did not feel anything bad or being discriminated. As far as the Jewish community, I knew a few, which coming in, you know, we were sort of chumming around, especially on Saturdays after shul. We took walks and so on. And we were liked with the whole community pretty well as far as the Jewish population, families.
How important was the religion to you and your family? Do you
Very important, because I remember my grandfather passing away. I was only 4 or 5, and I remember him very well, and he kept the tradition of a Jewish home, and we continued.
And the Sabbath, the Shabbos was an important...
As a matter of fact, we had a shul at our home as well. We had a Sefer Torah, a shul, and all the prayers on Saturday coming in, and different holiday.
So Jewish families would come to your home
for the prayers. Yes.
So your home was very much, it sounded like the center.
Like a center of the community.
For the Jewish community in Maricopa.
Right. Sure. If I may mention Passover, I remember very well. Before Passover, we were baking matzahs at our place. And also, if I remember very well, on a Friday, we're making chulent, if you know what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Friday night tradition thing, and so just everything happening. So it was quite a busy home.
Did you have any chores or responsibilities with some of the family business or the runnings of the home?
Chores.
Could you share that with us?
As I said before, my parents were out most of the time, so I was just running the household, preparing feed for the cattle, making different mixes to feed them. Same thing with the chickens and, all kind of poultry we had running around. I don't remember by cleaning the home, these chores I don't recall, but cooking as well, preparing, light things, whatever my mother told me to do when she left the home. And these are the major things. Yes, carrying water from the well, which we had no inside water, so we had to carry water, I would say, about a block away, bring that in, make sure it's full. These are and cleaning the barn and the animals, so on. So it's quite a undertaking for a child.
I remember when we were talking earlier that you had mentioned a man who you referred to as the Baron of Runcorn.
Oh, yes.
There was a little story attached with that.
Next to Markova was a little town which is called Leinzut, and it was known especially for this Baron. I can't remember. Did I mention it?
No, you just said the Baron.
Yes, I think I remember the name. If I can just a second. Potocki. It's called Graf Potocki. He was a very well-to-do person and very liked as well, because I believe he was helping a lot of Jewish families. And we had some land which is bordering with his. So I used to see him quite a few times, and coming to his city, and used to see him once a week or so.
Do you remember any incidences before the war outside of school of any anti-Semitic incidences? Not
really. My parents did not talk too much. Which I was aware or remembered. I did not hear. There was the odd person which they mentioned, which did a lot of trouble, especially to property damage. So these are the kind of things. The drunks we had to put up with, and these kind of things, as far as I remember.
So to summarize, how would you characterize your childhood up to the point of when the war broke out?
I would say very good.
You were a fairly happy child.
Yes.
And as you described your family, that's the way it normally operated,
right,
with the position they had.
Mm-hmm.
As the warriors approached, did your family have any inkling at all that war was to break out, or how it would affect your community?
Well, as I say before, they did not mention to me or to my sister, they did not talk too much about war or bad things, whether they didn't want to let us know or worry us about too much. Most what I heard is through neighbors and a few friends which I was chumming around, that what things are happening around the world. So these are the few things I picked up on my own, because there was no newspapers in the town or radio. I don't recall we had a radio at all. So there was very little communication or reports coming in.
What were you hoping to be when you were?
Well, my grandmother was talking all the time, lawyer. That's all I heard. The word to be an advocate.
An advocate.
Yes.
So if events had been different,
probably.
You may have become a lawyer.
Yes.
Perhaps we can just shift a little bit to when the war broke out in 1939. Do you remember where you were at that time?
Yes. Oh, yes. I remember vividly. Yes, I remember the day the war broke out, and the attacks on our village.
Could you describe that for us?
I believe it was September the 1st when they invaded Poland, and within a few days they were in our village. Now, the things I remember is the Polish army was marching. I guess they were running away or whatever on foot, and all they had is rifles. And I also remember the German planes were flying very low, and the army sort of were hiding in the bushes or under trees. And as a matter of fact, my neighbors were begging with them not to shoot with rifles to the planes, because obviously they'll retaliate. So these are the things I remember. And before I knew, a day or two, the Germans were in.
They came to your community?
Well, they came to the community, and they were, you know, just on the highways were just full of soldiers and artillery and horsemen, you know, all kinds of things.
When was what was your first contact with the invading German army?
Well, I saw them on the street. I don't recall being frightened at that particular time. Before long, all I knew, we had some officers coming into our home and looking it over. And before we knew, they moved in. They took over 2 rooms. We had to clean it out for them, and they say that they're going to stay here for a little while as resting or whatever. I can't remember exactly what the words were, but all I knew, they moved in and they stayed approximately 3 to 4 weeks.
Can you remember at all what was going on in your house at that time?
Well, mostly they were cleaning their belongings, doing a lot of cooking of their own, and that's about all I know of. I can remember.
Can you remember any of the reactions of your family?
No, not really. I believe my father and mother were a bit frightened, but they did not show any harm, you know, doing harm to us whatsoever. As a matter of fact, before leaving, they were quite upset leaving because I gathered that they were going to the Russian front, and they weren't too happy.
So this group of German soldiers,
of the German officers, they were officers, yes.
Okay.
And another reason, the reason they choose this home, because the facilities for them was, I guess, ample for them, suitable for them, yes.
So they stayed, as you said, approximately a month
yes.
or so, and they departed.
They departed, yes.
What happened next?
Next, another group of officers came in, not right away, but I just don't know what the gap in between, came in, and there was a different type of group. I believe they were the Gestapo type. More serious and more unfriendly and not talkative much, you know, and we had to give them personal service, maintain their equipment. They did not clean their equipment. When I say equipment, their boots and belts and rifles, you know, all these belongings we had to polish and clean, and I believe we had to supply some of our own food to them, whatever they wanted. And there again, I don't recall being abusive as far as physically. Maybe they were swearing or, you know, using kind of bad language, but not to my recollection. They did not do any harm. And they stayed on also about a month or so, and they left. But there was no communication, there was no conversation at all between our family and them. They were totally private.
So you had these 2 different groups of
officers, German officers, yes.
Staying at your home at that time.
Yes.
What happened after that?
Then after that, another group came in, and I remember them very well because we suffered greatly. Sort of like we were being punished, you know, giving in the service and all that, and we were terribly abused physically. And they were in sort of in a black uniform, which I believe they were the SS officers. And while doing their services, you know, pretty well much the same as the others, I was kicked. My father was terribly beaten, and for no reason whatsoever. I guess they must have a reason because we were Jewish, I guess. And we could hardly wait for them to leave. We thought we were not going to survive. They were very, very bad. And the day came and they left.
And in your home at this time, it's your sisters,
my 2 sisters,
your dad,
and my father and mother and my grandmother.
How were they treated? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but my mother, because she was hardly home, but I know my father was badly abused. They made him stay to attend these services for them.
And your sisters?
As far as my sisters, I don't recall anything at all.
The sisters,
Yeah.
I forgot to ask you earlier,
They were
they're
younger. They're
than,
younger, yes. I don't recall if they did provide any service for them. I just don't remember seeing, the same time as I was being with him, and my father especially.
Was there much communication at that time in terms of what was happening outside the home or the rest of the country?
No, I don't remember at all. We've seen a lot of movement with the Germans, back and forth, but that's about it. We were sort of on guard, to make the wrong move or say anything or look, for something. You just had to be careful.
Do you remember at all if anyone in your family talked about running away or leaving
No, I don't
the
remember.
community?
I remember saying no.
So the third group of officers were there, and as you had described the experience with them, they left as well.
They left as well. Yeah.
What happened following that? What's the next memory you have?
The next memory I have is a couple policemen, which was the Polish police in the Markova, came to our home and looked for my father, and they have to speak to him immediately. And my father faced them, and they said, Jake, or whatever they called him at that time, I came here to give you a tip-off. Disappear quickly, wherever you want to go, because they're going to come and pick you up. They're rounding up all the Jews in our end of the town, and they're coming this way, and as being a friend, this is what I came to say. And they said quickly goodbye, and they disappeared.
Approximately when was this?
As far as time, I would think it would be in the spring of 41, I believe.
And what was the
Yes.
reaction of your father and the family?
Well, we gathered all together. We sort of stood there and speechless. Where do we go? What do we do? And all I know, we just walked out of the home and just walked into the fields. We just walked into the fields.
And there were fields of what?
Well, there was fields, farmers' fields, which was everything and anything. Potato fields. I remember we picked potato fields and corn fields. They weren't quite high at that time because they were, they're not, it was spring or summer, so they weren't full grown yet, and just enough to hide during the day that we won't be visible.
So the whole family went to the fields
because we were aware, or we were told it's going to take 2-3 days to round up all the Jews from this village. And so we figured maybe in 2-3 days things will pass, and I don't know what will be after, but this was our plan.
So you hid in the fields
hid in the field during the day,
2-3 days.
And at night we were looking for food, where there was, I remember that, we were digging carrots, potatoes, anything. And my mother, knew the people very well, and we were afraid even at night to wander around because somebody may tip us off, tip off that they saw us here and here and so on. But she picked some families which she was quite secure that they will not say anything, they just help us out with food, and which they did, and tried to survive whatever time is going to take. But it took a long time. They stayed in the village, looking for every Jew they could find. And the report my mother was getting was from these people.
Which people?
Well, the one she was went to ask for food, at nighttime. And then we saw, this has been already a week past, perhaps even 2. What are we going to do? Pretty soon it's fall. People are going to start coming to the fields and take the crop off, and we're there. So we just picked ourselves up at night, and we were all walking, looking for a home. We knocked at a few doors. They just shut the doors on us completely. No way. They'll let us in.
Why was that?
Because we were Jews, and they know the results, that their lives are threatened much as we were.
Do you remember
Yes.
hearing them?
Oh yes,
people
definitely.
saying
That
this
was
to you?
announced. Yes, as a matter of fact, it was announced by the community and in the churches, especially in the churches. The priest made some speeches that to help to round up the Jews and and try to get rid of us, and that the Germans promised they're going to give them the properties or land, whatever is going to be left, as a token, you know, to help to round up.
You had a friend who attended the churches to hear this at the time?
We had, well, those people were telling us, which we were in contact with during the night, that this was the reason that we can't take us in. They were afraid. And he explained what the results will be if they do find Jews in their homes.
Did you hear of any stories from them about what happened to the other Jewish people in
Well,
the
that was
community?
later on, while we were already found a place and we were hidden out. So coming back to knocking from door to door at night to find a place to stay or to hide us or to keep us, we found a place, and they only committed themselves with my two sisters, my two younger sisters, that they'll keep them for a few days. So we figured that we better leave them there, and it's easier for three to walk around than five. And we kept on going till we came to another place, which was the family of Joseph Barr family. He took us in. We pleaded with him, and I says, look, try to save us. A short period, hopefully the war will be over, and we'll reward you whatever we own in return. He agreed on, and we stayed there. And we stayed there for a while. And time was going on, and the war was not over. And it's going in deeper and deeper and deeper. And he was stuck with us.
Mr. Barr was a Polish
He was a
person.
Polish, yes, person, and Mrs. Barr was a very, very good-natured and religious person. She always spoke with God will help and so on, and maybe this was our luck, because through her, I guess he sort of saw the light too. And he was stuck with us, and there's nothing else he could do. If he throws us out, and if they find us, his life was in danger too. So he had to put up a place for us to stay in his home.
Now, you said there were the three of you at the bars. That
Yes.
was your mother and dad,
And myself.
and yourself.
Yes.
Your sisters are at another
Still
home.
stayed.
And your grandmother.
Right. My grandmother went a different way. As we left home, she sort of chose to go in a different way. I don't know what the reason was. And she was perished, yes. She's gone. We
You'd
don't know
never
what
seen
had-
her
never
after
seen her
that.
after, yes. We had report that somebody saw her, whether it was saw her alive or dead, she just wasn't there.
Did the other family keep your sisters for very long?
Well, we were worried what's going to happen. We sort of gave her 2 days, 2 nights rest. And on the third night, my mother went down and talked to these people. Will they be willing to keep him? And they definitely said no. And she begged him for another 2 nights or so, and she agreed on. And she gave her a deadline to come pick him up, or else she'll have to let him go. And my mother went back and picked him up and brought him to this family.
To the bars?
To the bars, and we stayed together.
So there were the five of you.
5 of us.
That stayed with the bars. And this is in the spring of 41, the summer of 41?
That would be late in the summer of 41, yes.
Late in the summer of 1941.
Yes.
And how big was this home that the Barr family
Well,
had?
he wasn't a well-to-do farmer. He had a bit of land, very poor. He just barely survived on his land. The home was very primitive. I would say 2 rooms and a kitchen and a storage room. No wooden floors, it was mud floor or whatever it is. Straw roof. Where we stayed was on the attic. at night we slept, and during the day we came down into the kitchen area, where the kitchen and dining room was all together as one room, because they were in the fields, working in the fields, so we were allowed to go into the house, to this room, and stay during the day, and as soon as they came back, we had to go upstairs in that attic, which was no insulation whatsoever, just an open attic. They kept it for storage for hay for the animals, and we slept and sat on this attic on that hay.
You would end up staying at the bars for how long?
2 years and 5 days.
2 years and 5 days. So at the beginning, you the routine is that they're out during the day
They are
working.
during the day working, and we came down for walk around, to stretch out, and make sure that the curtains and the windows are closed, so that nobody see us. And we had to be very careful of movement. As I said, the house was very primitive, no insulation, no nothing, so you could hear any move, what was happening inside, in case somebody walked by or looking for some sign or sound. And we couldn't talk loud, just whisper, sign language, hands, whatever. And this has been going on till such time that the threat was beginning to be bigger and bigger.
No,
because
the threat
of I hate to say Polish people, because I have to refer to this because they're the ones who were looking for us. They may have had instructions from the Germans, perhaps, or whoever there, but if they wouldn't try hard to look for us, a lot of families would survive.
How did you learn about this?
Well, how we learned about this is this Mr. Joseph Barr, he belonged to underground army. It's called the Henderson Army. And now how this came about, I don't know. I believe it's been originated in England or something like that. And he belonged to that party or this group. And he was getting information, all kinds of information, newsletters or papers or other information. They had a meeting place somewhere because he was going out 2 or 3 times a week, to these things, and he brought all the information. He kept us posted with it. At the same time, he was going to churches on Sunday. He saw people, met people, and he was hearing what was happening around the village. And he told us all how dangerous it is, and it's going to be very bad because they were missing about 2 or 3 families, and they were quite aggressive to try to find them. So the hunt was going on constantly. So he decided that it's not very safe to be on that attic there, exposed like that in the open. So he had to think of some kind of a better shelter in case of an emergency. So we came up with a solution. It was a basement, and the trap door, the floor, trap door, staircase going down. And the 2 sides, there was storage areas. One side was for potatoes, and one side was for beets for the animals, a special type of beet. And they were full. Of course, in the fall, you took the crop off, and those basements were full. And he decided to empty out that beet side, build a wall, enough room to shelter for the 5 of us, and then a subfloor, and then the beets on top. And if there's an emergency, and there was a signal, we established a signal between them and ourselves, just in case there's no time to come up or say something.
Do you remember the
what
signal?
the signal was? I believe there was some kind of a number. That meant exit quickly to the shelter. And we had a couple incidents that was life-threatened. The first one, we had no time for the shelter. We were lucky to survive. And that day was April the 1st. I remember that vividly because it's April Fool's Day here. We were in the house, in their room during the day while they were out. And fortunately, they had a dog on a chain running around. And that dog made a lot of noise, and we knew there's trouble. And all we hear is talking and footprints outside the house. And we had no time to escape to this emergency shelter, because we had to go through a different room, like a hallway, and then down in the basement. And there was too many windows, to go through. So we just lay down on the floor against one wall, and just hopefully they don't look in closely and they won't see it. The dog was making a vicious noise, a lot of barking, and there were a lot of talking. And it took about 2 minutes, silence. They went away, the dog stopped barking. We sort of peeked through the window and there was nobody around. We did not go to the shelter. There was no point, because somebody had to cover us, because there was a trap door, and that trap door was always clear. And once we're in, somebody had to cover us, you see. And when they came home, we told them what happened. Like Mr. Barr and Mrs. Barr came over from the field, we told them what happened. And they were quite upset at that time, but it was our routine, during the day to stay and so on. And at night, you go upstairs to the attic. And that was that. And the second emergency was, which we were prepared, which we knew was coming. Again, it was on a Sunday, and Mr. Barr and Mrs. Barr was at the church, and he hit the sermon preaching that it's going to be an all-out general hunt. And they asked the people to help out. And he, after the service, he just ran home quickly and told us about it, and away we went to that emergency shelter. We stayed there for 2.5 hours, total darkness, damp and cold. We couldn't make a sound or anything, because we could hardly hear, in case somebody is coming or going. But we heard a couple bangs on the trap door, and that was by Mr. Barr, a sign that danger. And they did come to his home and looking around. And I heard the conversation. And they asked, can we see the basement? So he opened the trap door. Of course, they had no lighting there, no electricity, so they were coming by a little lantern light. And as he was coming down, Mr. Barr first, and then 2 fellows were following him. That's what he was told us after. The attraction was, luckily, that coming down the stairs, on the wall there, he had a shelf, a supply of homebrew, which they were making themselves, and wine, and so on. And he sort of attracted conversation to this shelf and this homebrew and this wine. And he was making conversation about it, whether he just finished making it or he used a different recipe. There was going on for about a minute or 2. And before I knew, they're out of the basement. And you can imagine that time, if one of my sisters, I don't know how old my youngest sister was that time, 5, 6, 7 years old, a cough or anything, a cry, it would have been finished. And we stayed there for another hour or so, and he let us out of there, pale, just didn't know, what to do next. And we calmed ourselves down, and we cried, and she cried, Mrs. Barr, and says, go have a rest, go upstairs, I think the worst is over. And those were the 2 emergency or close to death, here we call death calls we experienced, till the Russians freed us, or they came to this particular home and we knew they were Russians and so on.
I would just like to go back a little bit and ask you, what does the family of 5 do? Your family of 5 do hiding for
You know,
2 years and 5 days in
I
an
asked that
attic?
question myself so many times, and I never did ask my parents. I don't know, we just didn't talk too much about it after. I just don't know. I don't remember. Just totally in fear. I guess fear and time went together. It just went by. All I remember is when it was eating time, which was very little, and cleaning time, by the way, she had a daughter, a young daughter at that time. She was, I believe, 19 years old. And she had to take away our waste from us, which was accumulated in a bucket.
This was in the attic?
In the attic. And that's all I really remember. And looking for news, listening for news. My ears were open constantly, just listening. And that's all I remember the things. And lying there, there was no games to play, there was nothing to play with.
What did you eat?
Our diet was mostly water and the odd potato.
And this was from the bars. Everything
bar
was
they
from the
prepared
bars.
for us, yes. There was no meat, just bread, very little, because they were themselves, poor. And whatever left was left from what we ate.
Do you remember how the health held up for your family?
Surprisingly, I just don't understand. We never had colds. We never hardly coughed. I can't really remember any coughing. Healthy. In the winter time, as I said before, there was no insulation, it was just the roof. The air coming out from our mouth was just frost on our lips in the morning, on the hair, and so on. And we thawed out in the morning and sort of grouped around together for keeping warm, and we survived.
And this family, the Bars, were able to keep this secret about your hiding for the whole length of time?
They kept the secret, as far as I know, till today. Nobody knew, and I don't think anybody knows till today. And it was a very, very lovely family. When we were freed, we appreciated what they've done. We promised them to give us whatever we going to repossess, or our land or our belongings. We said refuse to take anything. The reason, I don't know. They were afraid, I guess. What's going to happen, maybe some retaliation, so they're afraid to take anything. And we understood. And all the things, what I'm doing now is communicating through letters. We send parcels, I send cash. Medicine, this daughter now, which is about 60-odd years old, is very ill, and they cannot get special medicines. So she writes to me with the prescriptions, and I keep sending whatever is available here to them. And this is what we do now.
So this relationship continues
yes,
to
but
today?
The father and mother are passed on, so they died. They're not there no more, and we're just keeping up the communication with the daughter. And lately I'm trying to find out who her children are and what's happening, and I'm trying to help sort of that way. Perhaps I can bring somebody in here for a visit or to stay if they wish so. So we're working on this particular latest project to bring somebody over just to see someone.
Can I take you back to the time of liberation? When was that in Marcoldo?
That was in I think we were liberated 2 years after. Would be what, 43, 44, I believe. All I know is we heard again through this Mr. Barr, the communications, that the Russians came to a standstill at the Russian front there somewhere, and they were losing ground. They were withdrawing. So we knew, as far as the war is concerned, pretty up to date what was happening. But it's just when. The time came, we already heard the shooting, which was news to us, good news to us. A lot of shooting, and a lot of firing.
And this hadn't been happening before then in Marcoldo?
No, nothing. We couldn't hear no sound whatsoever. And we heard again from Mr. Barr, there was a lot of retreat from the Germans. And before we knew, overnight, we heard the fire getting closer and closer, and before we knew, we saw 4 Russian soldiers and believe it or not, they just stood ground in front of that home. Whether they had some kind of a shelter or something to bury into with the weapons there, and they were shooting there, just unbelievable firing back and forth. And we had to go back to that bunker and that shelter to hide for safety, for fire or whatever. And that took about a day and a half till it was clear. And this family were caught on the field. They couldn't return home.
They were out in the
They were
field
out in
when
the
the
field,
shooting
and they
was
caught
going.
in this shooting, and they could not return. They had to stay on the field till everything was clear, and they came in and said, "You can leave now, you're a free man."
So the community was liberated.
It was
by the
liberated.
Russians.
And all I remember, we were embracing each other and hugging and kissing and crying, and where are you going? It says, well, we're going back to our home. All I remember, I could not walk. I walked for a few blocks, and that was it. I just could not walk. I was the only one. My knees swell up, and I just couldn't walk. Apparently there was no circulation from sitting and all this, no movement. Somewhere it swelled up. It was painful. I couldn't walk. Little by little, I made it to my home, which was the distance, not very far, I would say about 2.5 to 3 kilometers. We came into our home. It was intact. All I saw is a family there of 2 people, adults, and that's all I saw. And apparently, as soon as they saw us, they left. Which my parents gave them assurance they can stay on for a while, we'll work something out together. They refused and they left. And that's all I remember. So we tried to establish ourselves, but to no avail. There was threats.
There was threats
There was threats from the outside, from whoever, mainly, I guess, the only people were the Polish there. Certain people were threatening us. They just did not like the presence of us being there. There were threats for breaking windows. There were threats throwing stones, I remember. We had to put in shutters at night. Till finally, one evening, 2 men came in to the door with their gun. And my father answered the door. As soon as he saw the 2 people in the gun, he just pushed the door back to their face. And he took a dive quickly through a different room, broke the window, and ran out. I believe he told me he was naked. And ran outside and just ran as hard as he could for fright, and so on. And I did not see these 2 men anymore. They did not threaten us because we all sort of ran away from different rooms, And we did not hear from my father for 2 days. He returned. And immediately after, we just left. We hired a neighbor, wagon and the horses, to take us to the city of Rzeszów.
So your father returned from wherever he was hiding for 2 days.
For 2 days, yes.
And even though liberation had occurred in
we didn't see no one. We didn't see no security. We didn't see no Russians at that particular stage. We could not communicate with anybody.
So you didn't feel, the family did not feel safe?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So we just left everything behind again, and we had to go through another war, which was very, very dramatic and upsetting to us. We spent 2 years, saved our lives, and here we had to go through this again. It was worse than even before, at the beginning.
So you went from your own house in Markowa, and you went to where again?
The city Rzeszów, which was a fairly large city, Rzeszów. We went there, and we settled. We came into a place there. We got in touch with the Jewish community, or whatever the leader was, and he gave us a place to stay, which was an apartment block, I believe 4 or 5 stories high, and it was just filled with Jewish families from different areas. And supposedly there was a stop to transfer us to Germany or Austria, to immigrate to Israel or Canada or United States, wherever possible papers we could get. People had families in Canada or United States or Australia or whatever, they communicating and trying to get visas to be able to move on. Then we experienced another bad situation in that building. Another pogrom emerged. The reason for it, as we heard in the past, I remember as a child, before the war, there's a lot of, what's the word for it, stories going around, untruth stories going around that before Passover, the Jewish people need blood to make matzah, which is my experience. I was witnessed, I was helping making these matzahs. I didn't see such thing. The religion does not even mention anything about blood to matzah. It's strictly pure water and flour, So the reason for the pogrom was then that what I'm trying to say is this, perhaps I can recall the exact date.
This is near Passover?
Yes, the reason was for
45?
44.
44.
I believe it was 44. It was right after a month or two when we stayed home. The pogrom was what they've done. A child was killed in an accident, and I believe I witnessed that accident right beside that building. By a car, hit by a car, a 5-6-year-old girl was killed, by a car or a truck. And that child was taken out of the burial and thrown into that building on the steps and showing the public, see, here's a building full of Jewish families, and look what they did to this child. They killed it for the reason was having the blood to bake matzah. And they surrounded that building, all the people, mainly Polish, and the police, Polish police as well. And I don't know what the tension was, but we couldn't move, we couldn't go anywhere, and we figured, we're in trouble again and facing death. We could not communicate, because there's no telephones or anything. Somehow, word got out to the Russian headquarters in that city, and the Jewish leaders in that city, where I believe they called it the Hayas or Jayas, and they came in with the Russian leaders, with the officers, and they disrupted the whole thing. And everybody disappeared, and they brought in 2 or 3 big trucks and loaded us up on these trucks, and they had moved us on.
What were the people doing to the apartment block, to the people in the apartment block that they
Which
disrupted?
people? The crowd?
Yeah.
You mean the program itself?
Yes.
Just hollering, screaming, and just wouldn't let us out. Just, whatever the reason was, in fear and the commotion and screaming, we just don't know. I have no idea what the intention was to do. So we left with these trucks to the train, and the destination was Krakow, another place to wait till we have to take across the different borders to come to Germany or Austria, because these were the 2 main camps that tried to get us for immigrating to different countries. En route to Krakow, there was a city called Tarnów. And I remember that. They stopped the train. Apparently the Polish police wired to the city that we are en route and to make trouble again. They stopped the train. The Polish army, or I should say the police, took us off the train, and they put us in this train station, inside and outside, and they put on a Polish policeman and keep a watch on us. And I still don't know what the intention was to do with us, but we couldn't move, we couldn't do nothing. All I remember, there was a young lady there, more than 19, 20 years old, traveling with us. They took her in a room, and I heard screaming, which we all suspect it was rape. After about 30 minutes, she left. Her clothes was kind of misplaced, like sort of partly torn, crying, very upset. She sat down and just cried. 2 minutes after, we hear a shot. And that girl was shot.
That girl was shot.
She didn't move, she didn't do nothing. She was shot. And a panic occurred. I don't know what happened, this panic, the screaming and yelling. All I know, we were back on the train, and we went to Krakow. We arrived in Krakow, and they put us in another building, a vacant building, which was 3-4 stories high. I remember that. It was empty, sitting, lying on the floor. There was no furniture, nothing. And we did not stay too long. And somehow they took us out of there, which I suspect was some kind of a leader, supposedly from Israel, supposed to be and help us to, whether to smuggle the borders, which we had to go through the Czechoslovakian border, Hungarian border, and the Romanian border, and the Austrian border. They could not get visas, or proper visas, so we had to do it illegally. So we crossed the Czechoslovakian border on a train. They took us out on the border there off the train, questioned, searched, and we were back on the train. No problem. We came to Hungary, and they took us off again in the Hungarian border, and we went through the same procedure, looking and searching and questioning, and went back on the train.
Now, well, if I can just interrupt for a
Yes.
moment. While you're on the train, are you free to move around? Are you
No, there
under
were open
arrest?
trains.
It's an open train?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
there was open train. There was trains. As a matter of fact, I was sitting on coal. And I remember the nights where it was very cool. Must have been late in the fall or maybe in winter time, and wet and misty and just freezing. Just open trains, open cars.
Were you traveling with any of the Jewish
Yes,
people or families
yes. Oh, yeah,
from
there
that
was a whole group.
apartment
There was a whole
block?
group. I don't know how many, but there was a whole group of us. Till we came to Romania. And over there, they put us up at some homes. I remember there were empty homes, small private homes, empty. And we stayed there, I believe, a week to 2 weeks. And we were free to go anywhere. We went to the towns and markets, and we were shopping, buying food. We had to be self-sufficient. I don't know where we got the money. Somehow, I just don't remember that. And I don't think anybody was looking after us. What happened to that leader, I don't know. And didn't see him directly. And we stayed there for 2 weeks, and somebody emerged, some leader emerged from where, I don't know, and he said, we have to cash in some valuables you have, but we may have to buy or bribe the the Austrian guards on the border, but we're having difficulties with that border there. So naturally we were free to give him. I don't know what it was, whether it was watches or rings, something like that.
This is the Jayas
That
leader.
was,
who
I'm
said-
not sure, it was the Jayas or somebody from Israel, what we call a shaliach, I think that's the word I heard. He's supposed to bring us over to help us across to Germany or to Austria. And all I know that this leader disappeared for whatever reason. And we had to do it on our own. We walked into the forest, which the border was sort of crossing. I remember that. We were walking through steep hills and all kinds of hazard rivers. I remember little rivers that we had to cross. It took us 2 days. We had to sleep at night in the open forest. Till we finally came, we noticed a patrol walking back and forth. And one of these, they have these patrol towers. We saw that from the distance, and we stopped. What do? We can't face him. So we had to wait a right time. All I remember, we were left alone. I don't know what happened to the other gang, to the other families. All I know, our family were left alone.
And this is, you're in Austria
In
now.
Austria. That was the Romanian and the Austrian border.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And we sort of picked a different direction, and we sort of, oh, now.
Your family entering, just crossing the border into Austria.
Yes.
And if you'd be kind enough to pick up from there.
Well, we were fortunately, we crossed Austria's border without any incident. I believe we came to a train station, and we got on the train because at that time there was no such thing as buying tickets, looking for tickets. We just got on as long as there was room or just to hang on to something, and we just got on the train. And that's the way we traveled. And we came to this camp, in a town was called Koblenz. There was some kind of a DP camp. I don't know who was there before, but it was very bad, very frightening. It was right in a valley in a forest. Must have been about 8 to 10 barracks, sort of scattered around the area.
Who was in the camp?
Nobody.
It was an empty.
It was an empty
camp.
Yes. I don't think there was an army camp. The way it looked to me, there must have been some kind of a labor camp or a prison camp or something like that. It just didn't feel. Nobody felt right good about it. Even the air was not clear. When I say clear, it sort of had a heavy odor to it. An odor like I would say dead bodies buried somewhere or lying around for a long time. This type of smell it had. It was very frightening. But it wasn't for too long. We stayed there perhaps 2 months or so. And then we moved on to a place which I wouldn't call it a camp. It's called the town or city Windemichel, which is outside Linz.
If I just take you back to Koblenz, who was? Do you remember who was in charge there?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Do you remember feeling, besides being uncomfortable there, were there any threats there?
No,
to
there was
you
no
or
threats.
to your family?
No, there was no threats from anyone. It was just a temporary thing, and there was a kitchen there. I remember the kitchen. We were going for food. It was cooked for us, and who cooked it? And I don't remember that place because we were so frightened, that it was the first time for me, especially. I just have no.
So you don't know if there were Austrians who were running the place, or English,
I did not
or
see
Russians,
military
or...
personnel whatsoever.
No.
I did not see any military personnel.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you are now in
Yeah, we arrived to
in
Windemichel, which was a large. I believe there was a resident for the armies, and Austria was divided into 4 zones: the English, American, Russian, and French. And we stayed under the American side. So the place was quite nice. It was large. It was a large camp, if you want to call it a camp. It was 3-4 story. The buildings were about 4 stories high, and we had good accommodations. And we stayed on there for a long time. I believe it was 6 or 8 months we stayed on there. All I remember, I was working for the American Army, doing something had to do with mail or addresses, phone numbers. That's all I remember. something in this nature I was doing, whether I was delivering or writing something out, I had to sort things out or match things up. It had to do something with the mail.
This is already after the war is over.
That is after the war, oh yes.
How was everyone else in the family at this point?
Fine. Everybody, the whole family was fine, and the health was good. I can't remember any after effects as far as I was concerned. And perhaps I forgot to mention that point while we were liberated. Maybe we should go back. When you mentioned health, it came to me. And we came home, the hiding to our home, and during that time there, stay we were at home, my knees swelled up again, and I just couldn't walk. And fortunately, the Russians were coming through the town and going forward, and a couple Russian officers happened to be doctors, which stopped over there for a break, or whether it was lunch or whatever the case was. And my father knew a bit of Russian, and he spoke to them, and he asked for any advice if he knows, what can be done about my knees. I can't walk. And he smiled and says, I happen to be a doctor. So he looked me over, and all I remember, he said, to bury my feet in hot sand. And to keep on doing that for some time. Now, I must have done it. I'm sure I did it. Where I found the sand or somehow, I don't remember. And it helped. The swelling was gone, and I was able to walk, functioning normally.
This is the time just shortly after you got out
we got out from the hiding, from the cellar, and came to our home. So going back now to this camp in Winnipeg, during that stay, the whole family was fine. I felt fine, and I remember we were waiting for our family. We had some relatives in Canada, which we applied to come to Canada, and they responded, and we had to wait for the papers to come through, and they did come through. And the next thing I remember, being in line for making, whether to go through x-rays or pictures or something had to do with this, and when it came to me, whether they ran out of film or something broke, they stopped right there, and my family could go, and I couldn't.
This was in the camp?
That was in the camp, yes. And that was another, almost a tragedy, my mother, but bless her soul, she's passed away. And she said she's not leaving. We stood together so long, and she's going to leave without me, and it's going on for some time. I insisted. This is not home like it was. If the war is over, I'm in safe hands. I'll follow. I'll apply again and whatever I had to do, make this picture x-ray, and it will take a few weeks. They told us it will take a few weeks, and I'll follow. And that time I was 16 years or 17 years old, I believe, maybe 16. And I won't get lost. And same thing with other people, plead with her as well. And she listened, and they left.
So your parents and your sisters
left Winnipeg, went to Canada.
Okay, and this would have been in what year that your parents and sisters
That would be in 45.
In 45?
1945, yes.
To Canada.
The summer of 45, I believe, yes.
Then what happened to you after that?
Well, it happened to me. I stayed on for, I believe it's 4 to 6 weeks. I was quite content, quite happy. Did whatever I liked to do. I was free. As a matter of fact, I was traveling around the area there, coming to Graz, another big city. Then I went to Salzburg, had a ball. And before I knew, without any notice, there was a note in that office where I worked that I should report 2 o'clock to this particular office. I come there, I reported. You must be ready by 5 o'clock to leave. And all I remember, I had 1 pair of pants and they were torn, and I was on the train.
So that was your only possession from...
The only possession I had. nothing whatsoever.
So you got on the train.
Got on the train and came. All I know, I was coming to, I believe the port was, wasn't Hamburg, Bremenhaven.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I came to, Bremenhaven, to wait for the ship. And then in Bremenhaven I was stationed there in some kind of a camp again, or barrack, and I stood there, I think I was there for 2 weeks, till the ship came, which I had to get on, and came on the ship.
So at this point your family is in
Canada already.
and you already had relatives there
communication.
before? No communication. So
no.
they were not aware
of what was happening with me. No.
Did you meet any Canadian officials at this point? Was there anyone from Canada that you can remember?
Where?
At the port.
At the port?
Or through immigration?
No. Strictly, I had the papers to go and just waiting for the date to ship to part. So, and I believe there was a ship in remodel, a brand new ship. We had to wait a little longer because they renovated the whole ship. And I got on the ship, and all I know, I was happy one day and one night, and the rest of the way I was sick like a dog.
I noticed that you have some documents with
Yes.
you too from roughly this period of time. We're talking after the war. Would you like to show that to the camera?
A couple documents here. There's one certificate of identity. I guess this must have been when I applied for the visa to come to Canada. There's my picture there. And on the other side is some fingerprints and stamps and different...
Maybe you could just hold it for a little longer time there. And this document is from where?
That is from Winnipeg, from Austria.
Is this the piece?
This must have been the approval for me to immigrate to
immigrate?
Yes, to Canada. That's one document. And the next one, I had a document while I was in Austria, and I had to do something, so I applied for a driver's license, a chauffeur's license, and over there at that time, if I recall, you had to go through a 6-month course to get a chauffeur's license. A driver's license, you didn't have to, but a chauffeur's license, you had to go through and be able to tell everything about the engine, take it apart, put it together.
So it was like a mechanic.
A mechanical.
course.
It was very, very interesting, and I went through that to get this license. And that was in 1945. Yes, 1945, and I got that license.
Did you end up using that at all for
Well, I
as
used
a
it
chauffeur?
till... Oh, yes, I was using it. Yes, I was driving the trucks there. Yes, I remember. For a short while, but not for long, because I wasn't there too long. And so, as I said, the next thing, I was on a ship, and that took about, I believe, 11 days to cross the ocean, and I came to Quebec City, sometimes in October.
And this is October when?
1945.
1945.
Yes.
You came to Canada.
I came to Canada.
Who was sponsoring you, by the way? What relatives?
By the name of Mr. B. Kraut. He was a cousin to my mother, sort of a second cousin.
And they are people who lived in Winnipeg?
They lived in Beaujeu. They had a farm there, and this is where we were supposed to go, but I never did go to Beaujeu. My parents went there, and we stayed on in the city, and we were self-supporting immediately.
So you came to Canada on October 10th?
Yes.
And landed in Quebec City. Anything particular happened there?
Well, all I remember there was some people from the Jewish, whether it was community or official, I don't know, met us there, and they guided us to the train, and all I remember he gave me was $11 or $18, Canadian, and to travel.
And what language were you conversing in?
I was conversing in English and Yiddish, because I knew English a bit because working with the Americans, so I spoke English to be able to communicate. So I believe it was both, yes.
So he gave you this money and you went on a train?
On a train, straight to Winnipeg.
Straight to Winnipeg. And you arrived in Winnipeg?
I arrived in Winnipeg. I don't remember how I got off the train, who came to meet me. I just don't remember. All I knew, it was Yom Kippur Eve, in the afternoon, and I came straight to my cousin's home, which is also a Kraut, my first cousin. And I arrived there on Aberdeen, into their home, and I sat there and I was waiting till somebody would take me to shul. And that's all I remember.
So you're sitting at your cousin's home in
Winnipeg.
Your parents don't know you're there yet?
No, I did not. They did not come. I don't know what was the situation there, whether they were still in Beausejour or I don't remember. And the next thing I knew, we were together. A few days after the holiday, Yom Kippur, we found a suite to live on, and we stayed together again.
So your family and yourself were reunited
We
just
reunited,
a few days after?
2 days after, yes.
In Winnipeg.
Right.
Can you remember a little bit about how the family started to function?
Well,
and what you did
at that particular time, my father had a job already. He was working a place which is with raw fur. He was treating it or curing it, and it was a very dirty and heavy job. He was working there, and I was looking for a job as well. My mother was working. I don't remember exactly where she was working, and I found a job the next day or two. And my first job was at a candy factory. And right here in the city, an old established candy factory. I believe it's still in business. And I worked there for, I believe, a week, or maybe two. And I wasn't happy in there. Not the reason why I didn't like to work, it's just the situation. The foreman was very, very rude and abusive and forcing me to do things which I didn't do to other staff. Maybe because I was a new immigrant, I guess, or whatever. So I left the place and found another job, which my second job was, I can mention the name, I had good feelings there. Mr. Kramer was a furniture factory. Louis Kramer on Main Street. He was quite known then. He's not in business anymore now. I worked there for a month, and it just wasn't in me being a carpenter or a carver. I went to working as a furrier. At the beginning, I was stretching. They called it blocking skins, and I kind of enjoyed this kind of work, and then I went on to be an operator sewing fur coats. And I stayed on then for a year or two, I believe, and then I went with my father on my own.
Into his business?
No, we went together. He was, which in the old country, he was in the cattle business, and this is what he knew best. We purchased a truck, a big truck, and I did the driving and he did the buying.
Do you remember either for yourself or any member of the family if there was any assistance from in terms of education or any support from any agencies in the city?
Not to my knowledge, no. I don't think anybody helped us at the beginning. As far as money, no. As far as assistance to furniture, I don't remember. If we owned the furniture right away or rented with the furniture, I don't remember. Not do I recall any assistance from anyone. It was self-sufficient right away.
And the English that you picked up was on your own?
Was on my own. It was enough, and then I went to night school, of course.
And you went
St. John's High School in the evenings. I don't know for how long I continued, but to improve my reading and writing.
So you already started making yourself being part of this country. I understand you have your citizenship
yes,
document
and we applied for the citizenship immediately. I don't know what was the waiting period at that time, 5 or 7 years, but it was issued in 1954. That is the, what did I do?
Yeah, if you could just hold it straight like that.
1954, which was quite a happy day for me and my parents. And if I may add another point which is important to me, is when I arrived to Canada, and as soon as I was let out from the train, which was Quebec City, I came off the train, and immediately I just went down on my knees and hands and kissed the ground. And made a statement, I'm a free man, and this is my country. I'll never forget that. And I'm quite happy about it as a citizen, Canadian citizen.
You eventually got married in Winnipeg.
Yes, I got married in 1952, I believe, to a lovely lady, Ruth. And
you had some children?
We have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, which one son and a daughter is married. I have 3 grandchildren, and we are a happy family.
Did you stay in Winnipeg all these years?
I stayed in Winnipeg till 1953. And my sister got married in Toronto, and my brother-in-law was opening up, he was in the appliance television business, and he was opening up a second store, and he asked me if I'm not settled or prepared to leave the Winnipeg. He offered me to run one of his stores, and perhaps something may materialize from on my own. I went down there myself, looked over the situation, and looked good. And I informed my wife, I says, pack up and come down. And we stayed in Toronto for 2.5 years. She was not very happy. She was born and raised in Winnipeg, her friends, and at that time the city was quite cold, and couldn't make friends, and things did not go as forecast, and we came back to Winnipeg and stayed ever since.
Your parents went with you, or did they stay here?
My parents came after, and we've purchased a restaurant for them, as we figured there's no future for them in Winnipeg, and this restaurant was quite well-known, established restaurant, and was in a Jewish area sort of community, and it was sort of like a clubhouse as well in the back room. You know, the people who came sort of semi-retired or retired played cards and dominoes, and the restaurant was in the front, and they were eating, so there was quite a going concern. And I purchased this for them, and they came after, and they liked it, and they stayed on. I don't know for how many years they had the restaurant, but they did quite well. They're quite happy.
And you returned to Winnipeg?
I returned back to Winnipeg 54, yes.
And what happened
Well, I looked around for a business with no education, no profession. There wasn't much for me to take on, and no money. So I found a grocery store, and I purchased that store, and till today, not the same building, but till today I have that store.
And that store's name is?
West Home Foods Limited, yes, on Wellington Avenue.
And you've owned that business since 1954?
Yes.
I'd like to just go over a few things just to clarify some things from our discussion at this point. One of the incidences that stands out in your story is the incident on the train, or just off the train, with this young lady who you said was shot. I wonder if you could just clarify that a little bit as to what happened and the reaction of everyone around.
Well, when she was shot, it was a panic. All I heard is a lot of movement, a lot of screaming and yelling and not knowing what's happening. And there was only one guard, which I can't remember whether he was a soldier or a police. He was in a uniform, but I just don't remember whether he was in a police uniform or an army uniform.
And he would have been from where?
From Poland, yes. He was definitely was a Polish uniform. And he was the only one guarding, and there was quite a few people. I would say there was a group of 50-odd people. And everybody panicked. And all I knew that we were heading toward the train, because the train was standing right there.
Okay. When you look back at at your experience and at your childhood and what happened with the war. How do you put that into some perspective? How do you view the Holocaust and what you went through?
Feelings. I'm bitter, sad when I think about it. When I know who was involved, lost my youth, maybe it affected my health to a certain extent, yet I'm fortunate and fairly healthy. I have no feelings for the country of Poland, and yet I'm not saying they were all bad. Obviously not, because we survived. But to certain people who participated, what's the word? Collaborate with the Germans, which I felt was unnecessary to a certain extent. They were not forced or pushed. It was their own stupidity or ignorance. There were some people in the neighborhood which they were clever, and I heard comments making after and before that there's no way that Hitler is going to lead the world, that he's going to succeed what the intention was. And yet they did it. So the feelings are bad. Yet I live in a country here which has all kind of ethnic groups we have. I see Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian people. I don't have hard feelings against them. I talk to them. I'm friendly. I have customers. I do not discuss my past. They don't ask, or I do not discuss. Yet I can face them. I can face the Germans. But I'm not blaming every German. There were some, for instance, these officers, the first group of officers came in. We communicated. When they left, the tears were in their eyes, you know. So they weren't all bad. It was just a certain group. And that's the way I feel till today. I feel terrible, bad, the people who were involved. And I'm quite comfortable with the people which I face, which I feel they were not involved, you know, because they're Germans or Polish. I can face them. And memories, many times I think about a lot of things. Nightmares at the beginning was very severe. And you learn to live with it.
Do you discuss the Holocaust at all with your family?
Family, they were not at the beginning, a little bit. In the last few years, actually, they grew up. You know, their mothers, fathers, they start questioning me a lot. And as a matter of fact, in the last year or two, they made a tape about my past. They just wanted to know. They were very involved. Even my nephews in Toronto were all involved. They all wanted to know. Because they couldn't get any information from their parents as well, like my sisters. I'm talking about my sisters and their children. They couldn't get any information. They never asked or never talked about it. And I don't talk about it. If I'm asked, I'll give them answers. And friend-wise, well, we all know what happened as far as my friends, which are from also survivors. And so we discuss certain things, you know, in the news, what's happening in here and there. With this neo-Nazis, you know, it comes up quite often in conversation. You know, we know what went through, or like a person in Toronto, like the Zindel, you know. What do you say to a person like that?
Do you belong to a group or an organization that has anything to do with the Holocaust? Or
no, not really. I belong to an organization which it's called ANV, A-N-V, which is abbreviated from Hebrew in English. It's translated to Help Youth Forever. I was president twice. The reason I'm involved with this group is because we raise quite a bit of money through the year, and it's a small group. And we give the money direct. I feel good about it, especially to hospitals that involve children. And I know the money's there. There's a plaque with our name on it, you know, the organization's name. And we just donated another $10,000 to this Children's Cancer Foundation, bone and marrow, you know.
So this is a local
That's a
Winnipeg
local
group
Winnipeg,
of
yes.
Jewish survivors?
Right, it's survivors, yes, mainly. It's mainly survivors. And as a matter of fact, we just had a few years ago a reunion, which was very successful. People came from all over the world, as far as Africa, New Zealand.
And Winnipeg hosted this?
Came to Winnipeg for this particular reunion. It was very successful. And this is the only organization I really belong, because I don't believe to being involved just to being a name, you know, on a paper. If I want to belong, I want to participate and do something, and I don't have that much time.
Are there any other images from the past for you that stand out, or things that you would like us to remember about the Holocaust or to learn from?
Well, we learned. Hopefully we can prevent that. It should not happen again. That is a must. A must due to all effort, all cost. It should not repeat itself. It's a tragic situation what happened. It's just beyond. Even my family, my children cannot understand, or anyone can understand, you know, somebody go into detail what happened. There's no way someone can understand. Till someone sees it with your eyes. Pictures are fine, you know, films are fine. But going through from day to day, hour on hour, that's, I don't know how a human could put up with it, survive, just put up with this, you know. It's just, there's no way, in my mind now, if I went through this, I don't think I could put up with it now because of my years. But even people in my age survived as well.
Is there any other things that you can think of, or you would want to say before we close?
Well, the only thing I would like to say, I'll never forget those people who saved us.
This is the Barr family?
That's the Barr family. I don't know if these two people, these two Polish policemen are alive today. There's one person or two persons there we have to thank. And as I said, I'll never forget these Barr family. We communicate, I send parcels. We've been sending parcels 4 or 5 times a year, money in every envelope. I'm willing to help, even her children or grandchildren. I continue as long as I'm alive. And I'll make sure that my children will have some say in that as well.
Mr. Riesen, thank you very much for
It's been a pleasure.
coming today. Thank you.
Thank you.